we go. What's up, my friends? Well, it's 4:20 here in Portland. Thought I'd sit down and make a video not pertaining to 420 at all. I got this lighter here. It's a Zippo, the Wizard. I just was digging through some of my old stuff and I found a couple of old Zippos, and I gave one to my oldest son. And I showed him the Wizard one, and I was like, I don't even remember where I got this thing. But I started thinking back to Zippos back in the day when I was younger, when I was in my teen years, let's say, and I got my first Zippo, and of course, Bics were readily available, but the nostalgia of having it was something that people liked. People like nostalgia. They like old stuff, I like using old things. It's funny, people still use old sewing machines, old, various devices for mills and pruning and all kinds of things. A lot of devices that aren't too technical but are very mechanical. The older ones just seem better. It's just like the metal that they used to make things back in the day was phenomenal. Any carpenter knows that the older tools are die-hard tools, if they're hand tools, but not always. Anyway, like Zippos, they're not just mass-produced plastic pieces of junk. They're manufactured. There's care put into it, and a lot of those old tools and just old metal devices, even the old plastic ones, like in the mid 1900s, when they had a lot of, what did they call that stuff? Well, of course they had the Tupperware that came out, and that was a big hit. There was a variety of different, like Bakelite was one of them. Bakelite was a type of plastic that was used for dinnerware and things like that. And you'll find old Bakelite, bowls and saucers and stuff. They're actually quite valuable, the really old ones. It's funny, if you go to Goodwill, it's kind of where you really get to put your knowledge to the test. You see so many different things and you're like, if I only knew which jacket, brand names, clothes were worth money, and which, stereos were worth money. For me, I know the stereos, and I know the records, I know, like the old books, and certain other devices, but then there's people who are their specialty is like the plates and bowls and silverware. I remember going back in the day, you could go to Goodwill and you could actually find real silverware, like solid silverware, and phenomenal like 70s stereos for dirt cheap. But nowadays, the internet, it's brought us together. It's brought a lot of, it's made it easier to acquire things that used to not be available to everyone. But at the same time, it's really globalized the market on goods, and it's made it hard to get that good deal. Even Goodwill has their online auction site now, where they take all their really good stuff and vintage gear, and they'll put it up for sale online for bidding. And of course, somebody's always going to beat that bid. There's no like screaming deal. Once in a while, it's like auctions, like car auctions. People used to get really good deals, and they still do. But it's become a huge popular thing. It was a trend for a while. Or like people who were buying storage spaces, things like that. Sometimes you score, sometimes you don't. But finding old stuff is kind of a treat. It's exciting. I found some really cool like old metal, sculptures and stuff that you look at and you're like, wow, that there was a lot of love put into that. Actually, just came to think of that. I think I got them up on the shelf. Kind of dusty. This is it's a cello. It's a bronze cello bookend. Weighs about 4 pounds. And it's handmade. You can tell that everything's been polished and, and handmade. It's got a price on it. It's actually $195. And each one had that price tag on it. It's crazy. I haven't looked at them in years. Maybe I'll get these down. I think my kid broke one of them when I first got them. But I was doing a job for this guy. It was a gay couple in the West Hills, and one of the guys, he was always there. He was in his late 30s, and he was always home, and he was the guy who did the designing, and I was the carpenter who built for him. Whereas his boyfriend, I guess you'd call him that, he worked in California for a produce company, and he was actually much older, like in his late 50s. And they were both really nice guys, but they had totally different outlooks on, the way to spend money properly. Because the one guy was always out of town, and the other dude, I was working for him, so I'd see him waste all this stuff. He threw away all this vintage stuff. And, like, this painting that's behind me, it's from Tanasache. I looked it up, and it was, I think it's, can't remember his first name. Tanasache from 2002. And so it's only about 14 years old, but when I got it, it was probably 6 years ago, and he had it in his basement, and he was like, "Do you want this? I'm just going to throw it out." And I was like, "Okay, well, I'll take it, just for the sake of not having it thrown out." Huge mirror in my living room. One day I got to work, and the dumpster was just full of his clothes. Nice clothes he could have taken to Goodwill. But anyway, he was going to toss this too, these things, and I'm like, "Those are awesome. They're $200 each. Are you kidding me?" I just couldn't believe it. And they, along with it, he gave me a vase. Somebody had given him this vase, okay? And I can't remember. It's a Costa Boda, if anybody knows vases. I didn't. I had to look it up. It was a Costa Boda floating flowers vase, super thick glass, probably weighs like 7 pounds. And he got it as a gift, as a housewarming gift, when he moved into the house I was working on. And he said he didn't like the color because it didn't match anything. So he asked if I wanted it. I looked it up. It was like a $300 vase. And, to this day, I think to myself, I'm not going to say must be nice to be rich. I'm going to say that is ridiculous waste. And I just can't see it. Even if I was rich, I would not waste money like that. Come to find out that, of course, they weren't rich. They had like 8 properties that they were renting out, and they seemed to be wealthy, but they ended up losing their ass. They lost in the stock market, then the company went down, and then the 2008 happened, and everything just, fell down around them. Find out that the one guy had been spending too much money throwing out things like that he could have sold. Even at times when I've done well, I'm still careful about, being frugal with money. But the vintage gear, it never loses value. There's certain collector's items that are always awesome to have. It's back in about 2001. I think it was about 2000 is when I got into records. Really, again, for the first time. Because I was into them in the 80s when that's what we had as a medium for music. And I had tapes too, of course. And, of course, we thought CDs were the answer, and then we got back into vinyl when the whole DJ thing happened. And one guy I knew, long story short, he was a friend of the family that had ended up having more money than he needed. He spent like $1,000 on 2 turntables and a microphone, and, and a mixer. And he sold it to me for like $100 or $200 because he didn't want it anymore. So I was like, okay, I'll buy it. And I mixed for a while. I was really into DJing, and it was just, I loved it. I didn't DJ for like clubs or, anybody. I just did it by myself, and maybe for a couple parties with a friend. But anyway, at about that time, I started buying records, and I was at the same time getting into Modest Mouse, and I'd buy Modest Mouse records at the show. And, they're like $10-12 a record. Those records I bought now, the original copies from Up Records, are like worth $300-400 each. And I have like, the original ones, the first ones. It's because they weren't really that popular then, and once they got onto a new label, those older records were swooped up. So anyhow, the point I was getting at is over the years I fell in love with records and continued to buy them regularly, and I never felt guilty about it, because that's a nostalgic vintage type item that allows you to hear the music. But here's the thing, you can hear the music by playing the record, but almost every record you buy these days if it's a new record from a new band, comes with the download code for the digital version. So why buy a CD when you could buy the record and have a digital version, which you'll probably listen to anyway? So these records I bought for $15, I could now sell for some of them 60, 70, $80, or much more for some of them. But most of the records I bought, like, the band Ween came out with a box set a few years back in '05, I think. And I bought it. I bought 2 copies of it. And then a few years later, I sold one for like $150. It covered the cost of both of them, so I was able to have one for myself. But I bought a Hendrix box set, Pink Floyd, a variety of Modest Mouse, and a band called Appleseed Cast. They keep coming out with these limited vinyl releases, and I just keep buying them. I haven't bought any records in about a year, but I just ordered one. It was the Marshmallow Ghosts, which is on, it's a small label called, they're in Kansas, and it's called, God, what am I going to brain fart? I know I have the things in here. These Freddie points you get when you buy Graveface records. And you get these Freddie points, and they allow you to get, you can get a custom-made vinyl with a certain amount of these points. And every time you buy a record, you get one. But every year they issue this Marshmallow Ghosts reissue vinyl, and I bought one this year, and they just sent me an email earlier saying it was being sent. But I love these little limited edition things. They can end up paying for themselves. So I know I segued there from, vintage and metal items into records. Guess what I'm really talking about here are things that you can invest in that never lose their value. If you want to decorate your house and you go to IKEA and buy a bunch of junk, that's what you're going to get is junk. If you buy some older quality furniture, if you can get away with that, if you've got kids, it's near impossible. I have kids and I know how it is. But if you can have decent furniture, nice furniture, it's like an investment like records, something you can sell later. It's awesome. I mean, I'm hoping that I can get smarter as I get older and only buy things that I can really either use or things that I can sell later. Because I'm sitting here looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 stereo receivers stacked up in my back here in my room, because I've bought them over the years at Goodwill and elsewhere, and acquired them. Pioneer, Marantz, Sony, and Denon, and a couple other ones. Sansui. And I was really into that vintage gear, and I bought all these stereo speakers and vintage receivers. And when I got tired of it, I was able to just put them up on eBay, make my money back, and still have a bunch. The record thing got a little out of control. I've got, I know people have thousands of them. I don't. I've probably got 1,000, maybe 1,500 tops. But it's a lot, and they take up a lot of space, in my living room and in here. But if you're going to have stuff, it might as well be cool vintage stuff, right? I mean, I guess I don't like plastic junk. I like things that are interesting and cool. You could just as soon get something like this that's, $5. But when you pick it up and you really look at it and you see how it was made and welded, and even the little tuning pegs move, it's pretty cool. I mean, I respect stuff that's made quality, I guess. Stuff that has a hand in it. It just sucks that we're so mass-produced nowadays, Everything. And then we complain about China, that they're getting so far ahead. We're sending trillions of dollars over there to buy their junk because we think we need it. That's life. But I won't get into that. I guess I'll finish this video now. The nostalgia's done. I don't want to ramble on for another 20 minutes about old stuff. I just wanted to talk about